Alrighty, let's do this one. So, a couple of months ago, I made a video dissecting the confessionals in the first episode of the first season of Drag Race. Back then, meaning in season 1, queens, when shooting confessionals, would do so in the outfits that they wore during the day in the workroom. And so, throughout one episode, you can see up to 4 different looks on one queen depending on the episode. A couple of times in the past, mainly in season 3, there were a lot of instances when a queen in the confessionals would start a sentence in one outfit and then end it in another, obviously showing the producers meddling here and there to push a certain storyline. This type of a video, and if it does well, the subsequent videos for seasons 2, 3, and 4, and some parts of season 5, will basically be like a watch guide. In the original, let's say tryout video, that I uploaded almost 8 months ago, I showed you what outfit each queen wore each day, and then each of the confessionals looks. This time, I won't do that. I will only focus on the times when the days and outfits don't match up, listing them all, and at the end, summing up the more interesting picks. However, since I am a bit lazy, I will just play the main portion of that older video here and then continue with the second episode. Please excuse my voice. That was back when I was still putting on a higher pitched voice to seem friendlier. First, they used a Rebecca confessional from day 2 about something that happened on day 1. So, when the girls first came into the workroom, Tammy was, allegedly, being kind of flirty, I guess, with Rebecca, or she was looking at her in a weird way or whatever. It's possible that Rebecca just forgot to talk about that during her first confessional and got back to it in this one. Maybe the producers just asked her because she forgot to talk about it, or maybe they didn't have much of anything else to put into the episode, so they put this in. Who knows? But yeah, there is that. Next instance of this has to do with Chanel. When the girls are told what the maxi challenge is, we cut to Chanel's confessional pre-entering the workroom, so this look, where she talks about how many costumes, dresses, etc. she brought, and then there's a cut to the workroom and a clear cut in the audio, where she then talks about the maxi challenge. So here we have an instance of the editors using 2 confessionals for one narrative, similar to that one of Shangela's I mentioned earlier in the video, but this time they did not show Chanel's second confessional. We only heard the audio, but again, the cut from the first confessional to the second one is really obvious. And lastly, they used Nina Flowers' pre-game confessional about how long it takes her to get into drag for the scene where she was actually shown getting into drag before the first runway on day 2. Was that painful to listen to for you as it was for me? Let's move on. Episode 2 has a fair amount of these instances, but most of them are confessionals from day 2 used for day 1 or the other way around. Such as Jade noting that she does not think that Akasha is a threat, but that rather she's just trying to play the bitch. However, this won't work in her favor. In the same outfit as this one, we see later Jade, during the rehearsals of her team, saying how Tammy has a unique style during the rehearsals. Obviously, we know that this was then filmed after the said rehearsals, but that the first confessional about Akasha was retroactively used to further push the narrative of Akasha being the first villain of the season, and one that will be quickly eliminated. Similarly to Jade, Rebecca says, and I quote, "Some of the girls think that Akasha may be a little mean-spirited. Maybe if she was nicer and the girls liked her, they wouldn't be rooting for her to go home." This is said in a look that Rebecca does not wear throughout episode 2, but rather in episode 1, meaning that this confessional was filmed in, well, episode 1. A more forgivable use of the mixing up of the days happens next, with Tammy basically talking about being the third wheel of the group during the first day of filming, but the confessional was filmed after the second day. Next, Chanel is first seen talking about how the looks for her team are somewhat disjointed, and that she's worried that they may not achieve what the intent was. We don't see her in this exact look, and we saw her do a similar thing in episode 1 of putting on her beanie for the confessionals. This isn't an actual improper use of the confessionals, if you will, but I just wanted to show you that stuff like this is possible. Somebody putting on something over what they had already been wearing. A similar thing happens later with Angina, who puts on a blazer over her workroom look while filming her confessionals after day 2. Next, Rebecca's confessional of her saying "shut the fuck up" in the context of Chanel's constant complaining is clearly a confessional from not just another day, but from a completely different episode later in the season, as she had not worn worn this in the workroom thus far. We don't even know if this shut the fuck up was directed originally towards Chanel. Obviously, this was used here for the beginning of the storyline of Chanel versus Rebecca, but also just the overall storyline of the season that Chanel is sometimes a little too much. It's also possible that BB's confessionals from episode 1 were used here, where she goes, "You know what? Whatever." And then later when she complains that she, or they, may not have enough time to finish whatever the maxi challenge was asking of them. This may also not be a mistake, given that BB wears the same or very similar outfits in both episodes, sunglasses included, but it's worth mentioning just because of the vagueness of her statements. Nina, in an outfit that she wears later in the season, goes, "Chanel has a lot of experience, but she can come across as a little bit arrogant." Obviously, again, continuing to plant the seeds of the Chanel can be arrogant storyline. The producers must have loved Rebecca into Confessionals, which is understandable, he's quite attractive, because during her team's rehearsals, after Ongina showed them all the choreography, we get a confessional from Rebecca going, "Whoa, what just happened?" This confessional was filmed for episode 1, but it's nothing too harmful. We could read a little too into it and say that the producers put it there to make the audience believe that Ongina's team was going to lose because of the hard choreography she gave them, or that her win in the episode is quite deserved because of the set choreography and just her leadership, but that's really reading too much into this confessional. And to close this all off, Tammy, Akasha, and Jade have their confessionals from day 1 of episode 2 used for day 2, but their uses are understandable. So basically, the different confessionals in episode 2 were used to drive the point that Tammy is different, that Akasha is annoying and a weak competitor, and that Chanel is quite arrogant. Episode 3 is very tame with its use of confessionals from different days in regards to the intent of use, as you'll see right now. First, we see Jade, yet again in this shirt that we don't see her in the workroom in, talking about how Akasha didn't do half the work that Tammy did for their previous challenge, and yet Akasha was still there. Next, Akasha in this white look, which she wore for the introduction confessionals way back in episode 1, talks about why she is the way she is. She says that she was kicked out of her home at 17 for being gay. Mind you, this repeat of the first episode's first confessionals is used with Chanel first, when she's talking about her love for Oprah, and then with Ongina, when she says that she's not much of an impersonator. Next, Jay talks about how some of the girls, Chanel especially, are catty, and this confessional, which we've also seen funnily enough in episode 2 as well, was recorded probably during episode 4, based on Jade's outfit. Since they are using a future confessional for something that's happening in episode 3, obviously the producers are furthering the storyline of Chanel being the next villain of the season. Rebecca then says that rhinestones and lavish costumes are only ever there to make up for someone's lack of talent. This is shown to us in the context of Chanel, giving us, the audience, the idea that Chanel won't do well in this episode, and in general in the competition, but also further pushing the story of Chanel versus Rebecca. However, this was clearly filmed at a different time, as Rebecca in the confessional has a beanie on and not her camo bandana, and she is positioned differently to her previous episode 3 confessionals. On Gina's, when you don't know what's gonna happen next, that's kind of nerve-wracking, and that totally threw me by surprise, was taken from another day, but it's acceptable since it is so vague. Nina Flowers then talks about the language barrier that exists for her, and this confessional, I believe, was taken from one of her episode 2 confessionals. And lastly, to further push the storyline that Chanel's looks are over the top, but that there may be very little substance there, BB is shown as saying, "I know that Chanel is going to wear something very over the top, very costumey." Judging by her outfit, this was from day 1 of this episode, and it's probably said about Chanel's challenge look, but now it's used for Chanel's runway look. However, since the confessionals are filmed at the end of the day, it's possible that the producers simply asked BB what she thought Chanel would wear on the runway, albeit by that point the queens did not know the runway category of the best drag. And as you can see, episode 3 was pretty tame. On the other hand, episode 4 is loaded with different days and even different episodes, confessionals, being used to push a specific storyline, one revolving around Rebecca mostly. So, let's begin. First, Rebecca says that there is no connection between her and the girls and that nobody thus far has seen her personality, mostly because the other girls won't shut up, etc, etc. This is shown to us after BB says that she wants to see more of Rebecca, because the pre-challenge activity for this episode was for the girls to give constructive criticism to each other. This confessional was actually filmed after the second day, so already after Jade's elimination. I need to first give you the context for this second one. BB starts off saying that she's afraid of how Rebecca was going to make her look in the mini challenge, as they were paired up together. There's a clear cut in the audio, and then a cut to the confessionals where BB says, "It's kind of scary." We're supposed to believe that she's talking about Rebecca, but this confessional was taken from a later date, probably having nothing to do with Rebecca. It's obvious from the get-go of the episode that we're supposed to see Rebecca as inferior to the other girls, preparing us for her bottom 2 placement later in the episode. Next, Rebecca says, "I'm freaking out. There's just not enough time. I'm just gonna screw everything up." Obviously, this is them continuing the Rebecca sucks storyline of the episode. This Rebecca confessional is taken from another day, as she did not wear the jacket plus bandana combo in this episode. Also, that's such a vague confessional used to undermine Rebecca. For BB's next confessional, I yet again need to give you context first. After Rebecca says that the face BB did on her is not one that she would ever try, they cut to a confessional from BB going, "Wow, okay," as if Rebecca offended her. Again, this was taken from another day, most probably having nothing to do with Rebecca, and it was actually filmed later in the season. Chanel very vaguely says, "I should have won. I deserve to win this challenge," after Jade wins the mini challenge. This was definitely filmed after some second day of shooting. Here, it's obviously used to further show us just how competitive and somewhat delusional Chanel is. Rebecca, after she says that while she likes the face BB did on her, she won't wear it in the challenge. And then we get a confessional from another day that's very vague that says, "That might be misconstrued as, she's a bitch, but I mean honestly, she didn't say anything with this, like what?" And this was clearly filmed after Jade's elimination. Then we get 2 more confessionals from Nina and Rebecca, neither in their looks from either day 1 or 2 of filming episode 4, basically telling us that Rebecca has an attitude. If you didn't get that from the previous 5 confessionals. And all of the previous 7 confessionals mentioned happened in like 5 minutes of the episode during the first 10 minutes, so it was jam-packed. They really were trying to make us believe, or make us know, that Rebecca was going to flop this episode, and that she's kind of the outsider of the season. A more innocent confessional from Nina from an earlier episode is used, where she just says that she doesn't know if she'll win the challenge because of the competition that she's up against. And lastly, Jade also got 2 more confessionals that had to have been filmed after her elimination, because they deal with the said elimination. But this use of later filmed confessionals is okay. So, to sum up, Rebecca's look is shit, her book cover was shit, her trying to sell her book to the judges was shit, she's shit. But I would never say that. Episode 5, given that it had the least amount of confessionals, as there was a lot of workroom content, there aren't many examples of the producers meddling with the story too much. Firstly, Chanel keeps on her "I hate Rebecca" tirade, this time saying how Jade should have stayed and Rebecca should have been eliminated. In the workroom, day 1, when this was used, she was wearing a grey shirt, and as you can see here, her shirt is black. I believe that this confessional was taken from the first day of filming episode 6. Next confessional is also tame-ish, as it's Rebecca talking about how, even though most of the girls probably were rooting for Jade, she fought her way there, and that's just the end of the story. They used a confessional that was filmed after the second day of filming episode 4, so right after Jade's elimination. Rebecca then yet again says, "I'm not a bitch, I'm just trying to get them all riled up." We are shown this after she had paired up the queens with the fighters, in a look that we still have not seen her in. So it's a vague confessional filmed for another episode that was used here to make Rebecca seem like a villain. And let me tell you, this confessional was filmed for the finale. We also get a couple of confessionals from Angina in this confessional look, which was probably filmed after her elimination because she seemed really low energy. And also, it wasn't that important to any other storyline, but the one about her being eliminated. When Ru leaves the judges table to talk to the producers on who should go home, we get confessionals from both BB and Angina that were filmed at a later date. Angina's having been filmed even prior to episode 5, and BB's being filmed for the finale. But their use here is not really to portray somebody poorly or give them an unfair storyline. It was just to show the two queens being surprised by Ru leaving, so I guess it's okay. There was also a confessional from an earlier episode of BB calling Angina a diva, but then immediately after BB being actually shown as a diva. Since that was the only instance of that being shown to us, and really just seemed to be the producers being like, look at this funny moment, and a pot calling the kettle black, so I wouldn't really count it as like a bad use of another day's confessional. The last competitive episode, episode 6, does basically what every other episode so far has done. Shown Rebecca as someone who the other queens don't like. I don't know if these came from the fact that there weren't many or any instances of her being quote-unquote bitchy in the workroom, so they had to splice in random confessionals to present her as such, or if it's just the narrative that they decided to give to her. So let's go through this episode. Rebecca first starts talking in her day 1 workroom look for episode 6 about how she has only 3 more queens to beat till she gets the crown. During this, we cut to the workroom, but we still hear her talking, of course, and then she starts another sentence, we cut back to the confessionals, and see her in a look which she wore after she had eliminated Jade, saying, I don't know if any of the girls are angry that I'm still here. Oh fuck it, none of the girls like me. Chanel says, and I quote, Rebecca has been able to mislead everybody into believing how innocent she is, but she has not misled me. I know the fake person that lies underneath all that cosmetics. And this was filmed after the second day of episode 5. Chanel, clearly bitter about Rebecca still being in the competition, goes, no one likes Rebecca, but she's able to stir the pot and create some drama. That's why she's here. But I'm not bitter about that. That's okay. And this look is from the second day of filming this episode, but was used for day 1. Then Nina says, to me, it's very important that we can work together and look good. The context that this was used in is BB asking her how to sew something. However, this was taken from episode 2. You know, when there was that girl group challenge and it actually was needed for Nina and everyone in her team to work well together and look good. Quite a dumb use of that confessional, if you ask me. In the next confessional, we hear Chanel saying that she doesn't know what more she can bring to the judges, why she should even bother going on. And this was filmed after the second day of episode 5, so after she did not win the makeover challenge. And that's the original context. But here, we're led to believe that Chanel does not want to even participate in the competition anymore. And this is some actually clever use of confessionals on the producer's part, because it foreshadows Chanel's quitting later in the episode. So I'll give them props for that. They also use a confessional Nina filmed before entering the workroom about what's her favorite part while getting in drag, but it's just a filler confessional and negligible. The last episode of this season, the finale, did not really have much of note, and I won't really watch the non-competitive episodes for this series of Dissecting the Confessionals, so we're done with this season. It's somewhat tame when it comes to editing, but this was the first season of Drag Race. The basic stuff was there. There was minimal foreshadowing, setting up the main villain in Rebecca, though that was really aggressively done, almost to the point that it was somewhat comical. But what it's lacking is a proper protagonist, like the main queen to root for. There wasn't an underdog. Well, okay, no, there was an underdog. Rebecca was the underdog, but she was at the same time the underdog and the main villain. It was kind of confusing. But then Angina, Chanel, Nina, and BB were such strong, confident queens. Any of them could have been someone they pushed more towards the main protagonist role. BB especially, as the winner of the season, but she doesn't really have much of an important role up until like episode 3. Season 1 of Drag Race, if the confessionals are concerned, was just the Rebecca Glasscock show. And that's it. That's the video. If you have not yet, please do go watch the ranking of the season 1 queens that I posted earlier, and obviously share your thoughts on the video idea, the execution, etc, etc. Thank you for watching.